Welcome to this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be returning to talk about the Audit Committee, and specifically within the perspective of COVID-19. And the title of this session is going to be COVID-19 and Audit Committees Beyond Financial Reporting. And joining me is an expert in this space. Please welcome Stephen Parker, who's a partner with PwC's Governance Insight Center. Welcome, Stephen.
Good morning, TK. Thank you. It's great to be with you.
So obviously PwC is all over, has a great section on its website about COVID-19 and related issues. Also, you produced a report called COVID-19 Navigating Core Audit Responsibilities. I have seen that report. We're going to flash that up on the screen here. It's an excellent report for audit committees to do sort of a self-check. What's interesting about our title is Beyond Financial Reporting. There's no question that audit committees went through a challenging first quarter, unprecedented as far as financial reporting. But I did have Paula Ulub on earlier, and we did discuss financial reporting. So now we want to take a look at those issues that also are audit committee responsibilities, also affected by COVID-19. So let's start, Stephen. So what are you seeing out there with other responsibilities other than financial reporting?
TK, we are certainly seeing what you described in terms of audit committees having a lot on their plates. And you're right that as we kind of move into the end of the Q2 financial reporting process, that management teams and audit committees are starting to get their arms around some of the significant accounting and financial reporting considerations coming out of COVID-19. But the business environment continues to change and continues to evolve. And just like you said, there are other responsibilities which are core to the audit committee that are beyond the typical accounting and financial reporting areas, and are likely to have been impacted by COVID-19. So we wanted to make sure that audit committees continue to focus on these other core responsibilities. And in the paper that you described, we've highlighted 4 of those areas. Areas like risk oversight of internal and external audit, and ethics and compliance have likely been impacted in some way by the pandemic. So we developed this report to assist committees in thinking through these topics and the potential impacts that the pandemic may have had on their specific company. And we've also included some open-ended questions for audit committees to consider as they have dialogues with management and internal audit or their external auditor in these areas.
Well, I found the report or white paper or whatever you guys determined to be easy to read, very helpful, and interesting in the sense, again, everybody looks initially to financial reporting. We're starting to look at other things. So let's start by looking at, obviously, an important part that you mentioned, which is leveraging internal audit and external audit. And this too gets affected by COVID-19. So what should audit committees be thinking about in these 2 areas?
Sure, I think this is a great place to start. Let's start with internal audit, just because I think the internal audit group, being a member of the management team, being inside the organization, really has a crucial role to play in assisting audit committees with their oversight responsibilities. At most companies, you're going to see that internal audit's got a role in looking at the operating effectiveness of risk management and risk reporting, but also governance, compliance, and internal control processes. So I think we can all agree that business risks have now changed as a result of COVID-19. Just probably almost for every company, there's been some sort of impact on business risk. And we think audit committees should be talking with internal audit about whether, in their cases, have there been any event-driven instances that cause internal audit to reevaluate the business risks. Think about what new and different risks may have emerged. Things like cyber, supply chain, liquidity, those were probably all on a company's radar screen, but as a result of the pandemic, the impact of such exposures or the prioritization in the risk profile may have really changed. And then really talking to internal audit about how these risk changes, reprioritization of risks, may impact the internal audit plan. For a lot of internal audit groups, their plans were set probably late in 2019, and we're in a different place today. And so are there areas where internal audit needs to really be focusing their efforts? And also, are there areas where they can postpone a project until later because the risk priority just isn't there? This is really a chance for the audit committee to understand internal audit's perspective about the changes in risk, its impact to the work that they're doing, but also a chance for the committee to share their perspective on these changes and make sure they're comfortable with management's plans. Now, in addition to risk, internal control is another area that internal audit is typically very focused. In many companies, they are responsible for testing both the design and operating effectiveness of internal controls, which then support the CEO and CFO's certifications that go in a company's quarterly financial reporting. Now, I suspect there have been some changes, in some places, very significant changes since employees have moved to a remote work environment. And audit committees are going to want to make sure that they understand from management the nature of these changes and that they're ensuring that there are no risky shortcuts being taken and the processes still have the appropriate rigor that management had intended them to have. So we think it's important for committees to also dialogue with the chief audit executive around how they will be getting comfortable with these changes and controls, especially in this virtual environment. Are there any controls that should be reprioritized from a risk perspective in this area as well? Again, this is a chance through this dialogue for the audit committee to weigh in on their perspectives and making sure that internal audit is understanding that perspective and addressing it in the execution of their plan. I might add one final comment with respect to internal audit, and that's around their role in providing a set of eyes and ears to the audit committee as they make their way across the company, whether it be through geographies and businesses, to get a feel for what's going on in terms of corporate culture. It's really easy for an internal audit group to add a couple of inquiries of management to the work that they're doing so that they can get a feel for how the corporate culture across the organization may be impacted as they execute their work. Let's transition to external audit. In many cases, the importance of having the dialogue is the same. The external auditors are clearly independent of the organization and they've got an important role to play, and the audit committees are responsible for the oversight of the external audit. And not unlike internal audit, the impacts of COVID-19 have changed the way external audit works. So this is another opportunity for the audit committee to have a conversation with their external auditor and talk about how working remotely has impacted the external audit. Does the auditor still have access to management that they need and to the documentation so that they can complete their work? Audit committees need to understand how the significant audit risks that were probably discussed earlier in the year with the audit committee may have changed given the current environment. And then what is the external auditor's perspective on these internal control changes that are being discussed? Finally, external audit is also another opportunity for the audit committee to get some perspective on what's going on around corporate culture. And so specific questions as to that, I think, are really important in this day and time.
So, Stephen, I'm not sure we're going to have time to dig too deep into the compliance or ethics, but I do want to just have you reflect on the corporate culture aspect of that. it seems like that tone at the top and setting that proper culture for those two areas is really key. And what are you hearing from audit committees relative to understanding or getting their arms around a very squishy topic like corporate culture?
It is a tough one, TK, but corporate culture is foundational to a company's business and how it interacts with its stakeholders. And while some might argue it's a full board responsibility, audit committees play an important role in the oversight of culture, and in particular, a company's fraud prevention and detection processes. So it's important that they continue to set a tone with management that culture is important. So COVID-19 hasn't impacted all companies the same way, but broadly speaking, corporate culture is strained. And audit committees are going to want to ensure that management's focused on maintaining and developing that culture, that employees are being encouraged to ask for additional time and resources that they may need to get things done the right way. Your communication is essential here. It may need to be more often and to all stakeholders. Now, we know that corporate culture is a challenge because the SEC reported in May that from March to May of 2020, they've triaged over 4,000 tips, complaints, and referrals, a 35% increase over 19. So there's no doubt that this is an emerging issue for companies and in particular for audit committees. And I think in order to stay in front of it, audit committees need to be talking with senior management about how the frequency or type of reporting the committee gets regarding ethics and compliance should be changed to identify these key themes that are emerging. Additionally, they could talk to management to find out how they've begun to prepare for this increase in whistleblower or ethics and compliance matters as businesses return to the workplace. Corporate culture is being challenged in this current environment, and audit committees are going to want to keep their eye on the ball in this area.
Well, the one thing that I would recommend at this point, again, knowing that we have only touched on the surface of that report, is making sure that people can get their hands on that. And it's particularly interesting to me because you guys list the critical questions that audit committees should be asking. So it's definitely worthwhile. So where can people get a copy of the report?
So they can find the report at our website. It's www.pwc.com//governance insights center.
Okay, well, Stephen, thank you for taking the time. I'm sure people will take advantage of the report, and we appreciate that you were able to give us the overview. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you, TK. It was a pleasure to be with you.
And that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.